60%. That's how much Japan's automotive exports plummeted during the 2008 financial crisis. Global demand collapsed. Major markets like the United States faced economic downturns, and icons like Toyota and Sony were forced to shut down factories. These challenges exposed the fragility of Japan's export driven model, setting the stage for a bold new approach. Over the past decade, Japan has been steadily turning away from its reliance on exports. Why would one of the world's largest exporters choose this path? What are they seeing that the rest of the world isn't? How is Japan compensating for this shift? Understanding this change isn't just about Japan. It's about the shifting dynamics of the global economy. If you've ever wondered how world powers adjust their economic sails to withstand the winds of change, this is a story you need to hear. Japan's decision could reveal important lessons for the future of economic policy, self-sufficiency, and the pursuit of resilience. And in a world of volatile global trade, Japan's shift might just give us a glimpse of the future. A future that could affect jobs, industries, and livelihoods across the globe. But before we dive into why Japan is making this strategic pivot, let's take a moment to understand what made Japan's economy so export dependent in the first place. Only then can we grasp the enormity of what's happening now. Japan's transformation from a war-torn country into an economic superpower is one of the most fascinating stories of the 20th century. After World War II, Japan focused on building an economy driven by exports, pushing its technological advancements and manufacturing prowess onto the global stage. The Japanese approach was meticulous: develop high-quality products, improve them over time, and make them irreplaceable around the world. By the 1980s, Japanese cars, cameras, and consumer electronics became the gold standard. However, things began to change. Starting in the 1990s, Japan faced what came to be known as the lost decade, a period of economic stagnation brought on by a burst property bubble and an aging population. Japan's reliance on exports began to look more precarious as competition from countries like South Korea and China intensified. And in recent years, several specific events have triggered Japan's approach to reduce export reliance. Number one, global financial crisis of the 2008. The crisis highlighted Japan's vulnerability to external economic shocks as global demand for exports plummeted, affecting Japan's growth. During the crisis, many of Japan's major trading partners faced severe economic downturns, leading to a sharp decline in demand for Japanese products. As exports shrank, Japan experienced a contraction in economic activity, underscoring the risks of over-reliance on external markets. The crisis made it clear that Japan needed to diversify its economy to reduce its exposure to such global disruptions. Number two was the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. The disaster disrupted supply chains and highlighted the risks of over-reliance on global trade and offshore manufacturing. Number three is the COVID-19 pandemic, 2020. The pandemic caused massive disruptions in global supply chains, further exposing Japan's economic vulnerabilities and underscoring the need for greater self-sufficiency. Number four, geopolitical tensions. Trade wars, particularly between the US and China, and rising geopolitical uncertainties have made global trade more unpredictable, pushing Japan to reconsider its economic dependencies. These challenges, along with new global uncertainties, have accelerated Japan's decision to rethink its economic model. To compensate for its reduced reliance on exports, Japan has been focusing on several key strategies. One of them is boosting domestic consumption. Japan is actively encouraging its population to spend more domestically to stimulate the local economy. This includes policies that promote consumer spending and government programs to support households. Number two, strengthening local supply chains. Japan is investing in bolstering domestic supply chains to reduce dependence on overseas production and mitigate risks associated with global supply chain disruptions. Number three, encouraging domestic innovation. The government has been pushing for more domestic technological innovation and investment in research and development with the aim of leading in new industries such as renewable energy, robotics, and advanced manufacturing. Number four, new capitalism philosophy. Under Prime Minister Kishida, Japan's new capitalism focuses on achieving balanced growth, reducing inequality, and investing in human capital. This approach aims to foster a more inclusive and resilient economy that does not solely rely on export-driven growth. And finally, supporting key domestic industries. Japan is placing greater emphasis on supporting industries that are vital for domestic needs, including healthcare, infrastructure, and renewable energy, to diversify away from heavy reliance on traditional export sectors like automotive and electronics. The shift began to gain momentum in the 2010s, but it was under Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's administration, starting in 2021, that the push for reducing export dependence became a core part of Japan's strategy. No longer willing to be at the mercy of trade wars or supply chain disruptions, Japan is shifting its focus towards strengthening its domestic economy. Rather than only looking outward, Japan is now looking inward, encouraging domestic innovation, enhancing local supply chains, and promoting consumption within its borders. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's administration has emphasized new capitalism as a guiding philosophy, a model that aims to balance growth with greater equality, invest more in human capital, and drive innovation at home. The plan is clear: build a sustainable economy that doesn't rely solely on global trade, but is resilient enough to thrive regardless of what happens elsewhere. So, why is Japan shifting away from exports? The answer is about more than just economics. It's about survival in an uncertain world. By reducing its dependence on exports, Japan is working to future-proof itself against the unpredictable nature of global trade, protecting its economy from shocks and ensuring stability for its citizens. The implications are profound. If Japan succeeds, it could inspire other nations to consider the balance between global engagement and domestic resilience. This movement could reshape how the world approaches trade, with a greater emphasis on reducing vulnerabilities rather than maximizing short-term gains. In an era of globalization, Japan's strategy might just mark the beginning of a new age, one where nations prioritize resilience over reliance, and growth becomes more about internal strength than external expansion. Japan's pivot away from export dependence may ultimately serve as a guiding light for others seeking stability in an increasingly fragmented world. It's a lesson that goes beyond economics. Sometimes the best way to ensure growth is to look inward, build strong foundations, and reduce the risks of relying on forces beyond your control.